Here to talk with me today about his rare appearances are Tim Boyd, the president of the Theosophical Society, and actress and activist Jennifer Beals. Hey guys, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Now Tim, tell us just so we kind of get the 411, what is the Theosophical Society and what is its connection to the Dalai Lama?
Well, Theosophical Society is an interfaith organization that's been around since 1875. Throughout its history, it's had a focus on the unity of the world's religions, not as if they're all one thing, but the fact that at their core they kind of speak to common universal issues. So that's been one of the focuses. That's sort of the way that we've connected with the Dalai Lama over the years. You probably know that he left Tibet in exile in 1959, but 3 years prior to that, the first time he ever left Tibet at all, he went on a visit to India, and he came to the Theosophical Society's international headquarters there. He writes about it in his most recent book, Toward a True Kinship of Faiths. And in it he says that the event that he attended was an interfaith event, and it was the first time that he, as a Buddhist monk, and that was all he knew, was exposed to a variety of world religions, and the fact that there was, in fact, perhaps some essence that could be connected to. And he said he left that particular meeting a changed man. So ever since that time, since 1956, he's had an ongoing relationship with the Theosophical Society.
And have you obviously heard him speak before?
Yeah, I've heard him speak, and I've met him individually as well.
And were you a changed man upon meeting him and hearing him?
Yeah, I would say so. It wasn't one of those experiences where I heard him and then something flipped completely.
Right.
But having heard him over period of time, it's as if somehow you do find that the capacity of your heart can be magnified. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes when you're in the presence of certain people, they remind you of that potential, and he's definitely one of the ones in the world who has that capacity now.
Yeah, he has such a capacity to mirror us, and so therefore to refract light from us, right? I mean, that's almost what you're saying, but that's the metaphor I would see. Well, many of our listeners, Jennifer, might be really surprised as to why. I mean, they might understand why I'm sitting with the president of the Theosophical Society now, if they didn't know what that was and have heard what that is, why he would be here speaking to me. But tell us your connection, how you became involved with these two appearances with much anticipation here in Chicago in the summer.
Well, I had heard His Holiness speak in Los Angeles some time ago, and I was really struck, first of all, by his presence and by his ability to speak to very complex issues using simple language and humor. Mm-hmm. And I felt, in a way, what Tim was saying, that I felt my heart grew larger by virtue of being in the presence of someone who practiced so deeply their message of compassion. And when I heard he was coming to Chicago in July, I wanted to volunteer to help out and thought I would be, stuffing envelopes or answering phones or whatever I needed to be doing. And I was asked to be a spokesperson, and I very gladly accepted the honor.
I think that's wonderful because, I believe you when you say I just wanted to stuff envelopes or make phone calls, but it is one of the wonderful things about having you now here in Chicago with Chicago Code. I mean, of course, most of our listeners are avid fans of the L Word and followed you on that show, but what does that feel like to arrive to a place with celebrity and where you can lend your name to something and really pick and choose what you want to lend your name to? Because you've done that often with the GLBT community. So we've benefited from that.
I really feel like everyone has something to offer. I think, everybody has expertise to give. I think everybody has love and intention to give. And, stuffing envelopes is a really important task. Mm-hmm. And I would have been very happy to have done that. And, being invited to be a spokesperson is a deep honor for me. And I'm happy that whatever I've been able to accomplish in my life is of some help in getting an audience. I'm very grateful for all those steps along the way. But I do really feel like every single person has something to offer, and I don't feel particularly special in any way.
So when you say you want to help give an audience, is it a misconception that you must be a practicing Buddhist if you want to be, or a certain kind of Buddhist? Because I know a lot of people who say, well, I dabble, but I'm not Buddhist. Or, I believe in Buddhist teachings. So who is the audience for the Dalai Lama and for these appearances?
I think really what we're trying to do is get people of all faiths there. And I think that's what the dialogue is really about. That's what the conversation is. And not only people of all faiths, but people who aren't a part of any faith-based belief system. I think that's the conversation that needs to be had at this very pressing point in time. I mean, we live in a multiplicity. We live in a pluralistic society, and the actions that we take here oftentimes instantaneously affect a group of people halfway around the globe by virtue of modern communication. So, by practicing tolerance, by practicing non-discrimination, we strengthen ourselves as a society. And that takes everybody, not just some people from some faiths, but all people from all faiths to be in dialogue with each other.
He's really speaking to what is essentially our humanness. And I know that there are going to be two differently formatted appearances. It's not kind of like a show where you can come on Friday or you can come on Saturday. There are two differently formatted appearances that are going to try to intrinsically do two different things. So Tim, talk to me about the first event, chronologically, is Sunday, July 17th at 1:30. His Holiness is going to speak at UIC, and he is going to speak about his book, which you just mentioned, his new book, Toward a True Kinship of Faiths. But his topic is going to be Bridging the Faith Divide. And I think that this is something where, I'd like to tie in the GLBT community and say that in, at least in Western religions and many Western traditions of faith, this is a place where the GLBT community absolutely feels that we don't have a seat. Whether that is, very early on, a part of our response to coming to terms with being GLBT people, and then at the same time not seeing ourselves in our places of worship and our spiritual homes and spiritual families. So what is this conversation, mostly coming directly from His Holiness, do you think would be relevant to the GLBT community to experience and hear?
Well, the subject that he's going to be talking about broadly is bridging the faith divide. But really what he's going to be talking about is bridging divisions. And I think divisions occur, it's very dramatic how they occur in religious context. Obviously theologies, which are really human-made constructs, have this strong capacity for sort of blocking us from the experience of God very often.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I think GLBT people feel. They don't have an opportunity to have an experience with God or a higher
with
power.
The religions that have kind of put themselves in between them.
Correct.
Because we've been, in many ways, you're sort of sold this bill of goods that you have to come through a religion to have an experience of God.
Right.
And that's what we've been given. And as a result, you build up this sort of fearful approach to the one who can take away your goodness or give you your goodness. And that's most people's concept of God. But in this particular case, that's really a result of theologies which over time have evolved to suit a variety of needs. Political, but very often sort of fear-based sorts of thinking that has been perhaps useful in a given time, but outlives its usefulness. And so there comes a point, and I think that point is described by this very time we live in, where all of these sorts of barriers that have been constructed to give the illusion of security just don't hold anymore. Everybody is rubbing up against everybody else. There is no possibility to exclude the person who is gay. There is no possibility to exclude the person who is Muslim, because it's your neighbor and it's in your family. So what do you do about that? And I think this conversation in a larger sense, I mean, it's pointed at religions.
Sure.
Because that's His Holiness's sort of field. But really he speaks to humanity. And all of those things that obstruct the flow of your own humanity are the very sorts of divides that have to be bridged.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think it's a real cry. I mean, I've been on the radio for 12 years speaking to GLBT issues, and one of my personal testimonies, and probably because I grew up in the Smoky Mountains of the South, has been that, you know, the GLBT community has kind of thrown out the baby with the bathwater. We have almost replaced our sexuality with our spirituality. Mm-hmm. And when you look at other groups who have had civil rights movements, they haven't had to be extracted from a place of spirituality and faith. For many, African American community, it's been something that has buttressed and has actually been the crying song for that community. And so I think more than ever, you know, we're at a really critical moment where politics and religion are so enmeshed for us as queer people, for us in trying to belong, in trying to be in a vulnerable, private, spiritual place with our humanity, with others, and in fellowship with others who may not be like us, and that be okay. And I'm just wondering that, you know, obviously the Dalai Lama, we have much to learn from him as a community, don't we? I mean, of GLBT people, I'm sure everybody, but I'm speaking most specifically to the gay community, because he as well has had the political and the spiritual so, you know, so enmeshed.
And then it all comes down to compassion, that, you know, even when the ideas seem so complex, that, you know, where there is the convergence, where there is the seed, really is this idea of compassion. And it seems so simple, and yet it is so difficult to put into practice day in and day out, you know.
What are the basic tenets that you think that are coming out of this new book that are insights of how we bridge this?
Well, I mean,
these gaps.
One of the things that he really does speak about, and it's not really a new message, but I think probably what's happening with him is what happens with all of us. You know, we tend to think of him as this great sort of aloof figure, you know, the Dalai Lama. That's a title for a human being.
Yes.
And as a human being, he'll be 76 when he gets here this time. And for most people, that's a stage in life when you become quite reflective. And you really start to become aware, if you were not before, that the clock's ticking. And whatever it is that we're here to do, you know, there's only so much sand left in the hourglass. And I think he has that sort of sense as well. And so what he's really doing, I think, I mean, again, this is me speaking.
Right.
And of course I know.
And actually, Jennifer's actually the spokesperson.
Jennifer is the spokesperson. But I'm just thinking that what's happening with him is that he's targeting those areas that he feels really are most critical, where his life energy will yield the greatest fruit. And the sort of divides we see between the religions of the world and the sort of seeming permanency that they have. I mean, in this country you say Muslim, and it just conjures up this whole wall of images.
In the gay community, you say Christian, and it conjures up a whole wall of images. I mean, right? It's what is our lens? What is the lens through which we see the world?
But every one of those images is a person really just like you and me, but with this particular different bend of prejudice. And so that's the kind of thing we have to acknowledge, and also recognize that there are features about whoever it is that we can come to understand and that we can actually come to appreciate. And that's where we meet.
And the work is in how do you make a relationship to that person that you deem as other. Because everybody has that person or that group of people who they think of as other. And so how do you go about creating a relationship, a positive relationship? And hopefully he will be speaking to some of these questions.
Well, and he's going to, in a real tactile way or a visual way, assemble a number of different people and voices and perspectives for his second appearance, which will be Monday, July 18th, 9:30 a.m. It's not a nighttime thing. Boys, it's not a nighttime thing. 9:30 a.m. at the Harris Theater, where many leaders will come together for a conversation. Tell me a little bit about who some of the people that will be joining the stage with His Holiness will be.
I know Rabbi Michael Lerner will be there. Dr. Ingrid Mattson will be there, and Reverend Peg Chamberlain will be taking part as well.
So we'll have people of Jewish faith.
The Abrahamic.
Yes.
Islam and as well as Christianity.
Right.
And then Ibo Patel, who's local to Chicago.
Right.
He'll be moderating.
And that will just be a forum, a conversation, a roundtable for them of the state of where we are today?
Yes, and how? I'm sorry.
No.
Go ahead.
No.
Spokesman.
And I think it'll be about, again, bridging those gaps, bridging that divide and hearing different perspectives. And there's also the opportunity to write in questions for the Dalai Lama on the website. So I think it's really important for people to speak up with their questions so that he can understand what's on people's minds and hearts, and so that he can also give those questions to other faith leaders on the panel.
Could I encourage you to encourage your listeners to submit questions on the website?
Well, you just did.
Submit questions,
and we will have that website linked, but that is where you can get full information on this entire 2-day appearances by the Dalai Lama. It's DalaiLamaChicago.com. Couldn't be simpler. You can go through our own show notes and click right through, or just on your own device, DalaiLamaChicago.com. So these are two very different events. You could definitely do both of them, and are encouraged to do both of them. When was his last appearance in Chicago, and how do you think things have changed? I mean, I know you said he becomes more reflective, which for me that's an overwhelming thought when you get more reflective. But what has changed since his last appearance here?
Well, he was last year in 2007, and I think we all think back to 2007. It was a very different environment in very many ways.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of
Chicago too.
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, gas was under $2.
Was it? Can we even reflect back on the time when it was that low?
So I mean, there's been a lot of changes for all of us. Oftentimes, it seems so incremental that we think that very little has changed. But of course, I mean, the news of the last 72 hours. This 10-year manhunt has ended in the way it has. That's one item that has captured the world's consciousness, and there are countless others.
Right. And I think the economy, the cycle that it's in right now, causes such agitation that that's the time when people tend to make more divisions, when they're fearful. And I think it's a very appropriate time for the city as well to have His Holiness come and speak.
Well, it's so interesting because, I mean, it would have been, 5 years after 9/11, but it was a time in which the country was kind of in a widespread fear, administratively. We had from, our leaders telling us to be fearful. And now, as you point out, Jennifer, it's far more personal now. It's what has gone from the macroscopic has become extremely microscopic to how do I pay my bills? Am I going to lose my job?
Is
how
that
do I
person
take care
going
of
to
my
take
kids?
my job?
Is that person going to take my job? Is a machine going to take my job?
Right.
When we're looking at how many people you park your car, and there's nobody who greets you to park your car anymore. It's all automated,
that's
right?
True.
And all of those things. So it seems like it is a time that it's a conversation as opposed to kind of legislation and orange alerts and that type of ways that are supposed to make us feel right, more comfortable and more okay.
It's important to have someone remind you that at any given moment in your life you have the choice between love or fear, and that's a choice you make. You make the choice of how you react to events. And I'm so looking forward to hearing him speak.
I'm excited to hear
I
him
know. I
speak.
feel like, it's Christmas.
Christmas in July. Well, I just want to ask a couple of questions, Jennifer, because Tim and I, we live here full time, all the time, and have. And I know you're from here, but are you enjoying being in Chicago more? I mean, what are the? I know because I just visited Vancouver last year, and I know you spent a lot of time there. So I actually heard where some of your favorite areas, Commercial Drive, and all of that were. And,
right.
Hit out in some of your haunts probably, but what are you enjoying about Chicago? And
well, first and foremost,
I
I enjoy being with my family. I enjoy being with my friends. I love the architecture. I get rhapsodic around Wacker Drive in Michigan, and and I love going to the theater. I go to the theater a lot. I go see live theater a lot more often than I go to see films.
Oh wow, great!
Yeah.
And I also want to ask. I know you are a photographer, and that you, as you are lending your name to this, you've lent your voice often to raising money for the Matthew Shepard Foundation, which is an organization very dear to my heart too. And you published the L Word book of just kind of candid, really giving us a glimpse into your vantage point. So much so that you're in it very little yourself.
It's like the family photo
you should
album.
have shot in the mirror a few times, but and those proceeds went to the Matthew Shepard Foundation. Are you hoping to get some photographs of His Holiness yourself?
No, actually, I didn't even think about it. I just want to go and listen. I really just want to go and listen.
So more, you're going to be photographing the rapsodic architecture and landscape of Chicago instead.
Yes, I didn't even think to bring my camera. I didn't even think about it, actually.
Well, I've now
planted a seed.
I'm sure they would be happy to let you take some pictures there. Well, how do people get information? Is there any other way, or if they want to volunteer? Are there needs with these two appearances? I know it's a really big, big orchestration of a lot of moving parts to have two of these dates happen. So how can people get involved, Tim, if they want, or simply you just want their presence in the audience?
Well, the best way, we're going to be having some sort of volunteer needs. The best way would probably be to go onto our website. They can connect to a Facebook page there as well.
Okay.
And those would be the best places to get that sort of information.
Great.
Like us.
Yes, like us. I'm sure they all do. Well, the Dalai Lama of Tibet is returning to Chicago after many years, July 17th and 18th, for two public speaking events at the UIC Pavilion and the Harris Theater of Music and Dance, both fantastic facilities. And if you do want more information, you can visit DalaiLamaChicago.com and like their Facebook page, offer your services, because, it worked out really well for Jennifer Beals. She's a spokesperson now. And possibly going to be the Dalai Lama's personal photographer while he's in town. So
you could be the next spokesperson.
Exactly. Tim and Jennifer, thank you so much for your time today. And I hope many of you will come out and try to bridge the gaps that are in your own faith. Find a kinship with a spiritual part of yourself that perhaps you've been that has been locked off for a while. I encourage you to just be willing to try that and to sit in His presence and hear if it speaks to your heart. So thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back next time.